Look up tonight. Wherever you are in the world, whether you're in a city where streetlights dim the stars or out in the wilderness where the sky sprawls endlessly above you. There it is, the moon. Silent, constant, glowing with a soft light that doesn't belong to it at all, but borrowed from a sun that's already set beyond the horizon. The moon doesn't rush. It doesn't demand your attention like the blaze of daylight. Instead, it waits. It hangs there, patient and pale, casting long shadows across the earth, turning rivers into ribbons of silver, making forests whisper with strange shapes and sounds. And for as long as humans have walked this planet, we have looked up at that glowing orb and wondered, before we had words for it, before we had science to explain its phases or telescopes to map its craters. The moon was already everything. It was the clock by which we measured our nights, the calendar that told us when to plant, when to harvest, when to prepare for winter's grip. It was the guide that sailors followed across black oceans, the companion that hunters tracked by, the signal that told mothers their time had come. But more than any of that, the moon was divine. The people of the ancient world. The moon wasn't just a celestial body following gravitational laws. It was a god, a goddess, a living presence that watched over the world with gentle eyes. And every culture, no matter how distant from one another, no matter how different their languages or lands, felt the same pull. They built temples in its honor. They sang hymns beneath its glow. They carved its image into stone, wove its cycles into their myths, and whispered prayers to it in the darkest hours of the night. Tonight, as you settle into stillness, let yourself drift back through time. Let the moon carry you to places where its light was sacred, where its phases marked the rhythm of life itself. This is the story of how humanity worshipped the moon, not with confusion or fear, but with reverence, wonder, and love. And the story begins long, long ago, before history was even written down. Imagine a time before cities, before kingdoms, before written language etched the first symbols into clay. A time when humans were few, scattered across vast landscapes, living in small bands that moved with the seasons, following herds, gathering roots, surviving by instinct and observation. The moon was already there, of course. It had always been there. But for these early people, our distant ancestors, it was more than light in the darkness. It was a mystery they couldn't ignore. Picture a cave in what we now call France, tens of thousands of years ago. The entrance is narrow, hidden among rocks and tangled roots. Inside, the walls are rough and cold, but there's warmth here too, a small fire crackling, casting flickering shadows. And on those walls, painted in ochre and charcoal, are images, handprints, bison, horses running in herds, and scattered among them, symbols that archaeologists believe represent the moon's phases, crescents, circles, patterns of dots that align with lunar months. These weren't random marks. They were records, calendars, evidence that even in the deep prehistory of humankind, people were watching the sky, counting the nights, tracking the moon's slow transformation from sliver to fullness and back again. Why did they care so much? Because the moon was the only constant in a world of chaos. Days were marked by the sun's journey, yes, but nights belonged to the moon. And in those nights, the moon became a timekeeper, a predictor, a symbol of cycles that repeated with comforting regularity. Women noticed it first, perhaps, the way the moon's phases matched their own body's rhythms, the way fertility seemed to pulse in time with the waxing and waning light. Early tribes began to associate the moon with birth, with growth, with the mysterious forces that governed life itself. Lunar goddesses emerged in thought long before they had names. The feminine divine, round and radiant, swelling with life just as the moon swelled in the sky in the cold northern reaches of what is now Scandinavia. Tribes carved spirals into stone, endless loops that mirrored the moon's eternal return. In Africa, ancient peoples marked bones with notches, lunar tallies that helped them predict migrations of game or the arrival of seasonal rains. In the Americas, long before pyramids rose or empires formed, indigenous groups honored the moon in dances and songs, weaving its light into creation stories where the moon was either a protector, a trickster, or the first being to bring order to the night. That what's astonishing is the universality of it. Cultures separated by oceans and millennia all came to the same conclusion: the moon mattered. It wasn't just a thing to look at. It was alive, divine, powerful. And if you paid attention to it, if you honored it, perhaps it would bless you in return. These first lunar beliefs didn't have temples yet. They didn't have priests or holy texts. But they had something deeper, an instinctive recognition that the moon was part of the sacred order of existence. And as humanity grew, as tribes became villages and villages became civilizations, that recognition only deepened. The moon was about to receive its first names, its first temples, its first prayers spoken aloud in languages that would echo through history. And it all began in the cradle of civilization itself, Mesopotamia, where the rivers ran wide and the first cities gleamed under the desert stars that eye in the land between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. Something extraordinary was happening. Humanity was learning to settle, to build, to write. And as the first cities rose from the Mesopotamian plains, so too did the first organized religions. Among the earliest gods to receive temples, hymns, and offerings was a deity who ruled the night with quiet authority, Nana, also called Sin, the moon god. Close your eyes and picture the city of Ur. Around 2100 BCE, the ziggurat rises like a mountain from the flat desert, its massive stone steps leading skyward. At its summit sits a temple, and within that temple burns a sacred flame, tended day and night by priests who serve the moon. They are waiting for the crescent to appear in the evening sky, marking the beginning of a new month. When it does, the city erupts in celebration. Drums sound, incense rises. The people of Ur believe their god has returned from his journey through the underworld, reborn in silver light. Nana was not a fierce god. He was not a god of war or thunder. He was gentle, watchful, serene. The Sumerians saw him as a wise elder, a shepherd who guided the stars like a flock across the heavens. His light was protective, warding off the dangers that lurked in darkness. His cycles were the measure of time itself. Months, seasons, years, all dictated by his waxing and waning face. But Nana was more than a timekeeper. He was also a father. In Sumerian mythology, he was the father of Inanna, the goddess of love and war, and Utu, the sun god. The moon, they believed, gave birth to the sun each dawn, ushering light into the world before retreating to rest during the day. This made Nana a god of balance, a deity who understood both light and shadow, life and death, the seen and the unseen. The priests of Ur kept meticulous lunar calendars, tracking every phase with obsessive precision. They believed that the state of the moon reflected the will of the gods. A bright, full moon meant blessings. A dim or obscured moon signaled danger. Eclipses, when the moon turned blood red or vanished entirely, were moments of existential dread. The ancient texts describe rituals performed during eclipses, offerings of bread and beer, prayers chanted in desperate hope that the moon would return unharmed as centuries passed. The Babylonians inherited these beliefs and deepened them. They renamed Nana as Sin and elevated him to one of the supreme deities of their pantheon. The city of Haran became his new holy site, and pilgrims traveled vast distances to stand in his temple, to gaze at the crescent symbol carved above its gates, to leave gifts of silver, the metal most associated with lunar light. The Babylonians were astronomers as much as they were worshippers. They mapped the moon's movements with stunning accuracy, predicting eclipses years in advance. They believed the heavens were a divine script, written by the gods, and the moon was one of its most important characters. To understand the moon was to understand fate itself. But even as empires rose and fell, even as the great cities of Mesopotamia crumbled into dust, the reverence for the moon endured. It traveled west along trade routes, carried by merchants and mystics, until it reached the fertile banks of another great river, the Nile. There, in Egypt, the moon would take on new forms, new names, and new mysteries that would captivate the world for millennia. The Nile flows like a living vein through the desert, bringing life where there should be none. And by its banks, under skies so clear that the stars seem close enough to touch, the ancient Egyptians built one of the most sophisticated civilizations the world has ever known. They studied the heavens obsessively, mapping constellations, calculating solstices, and, Most importantly, watching the moon. But unlike the Mesopotamians, who worshipped a single lunar deity, the Egyptians divided the moon's power among several gods, each representing a different aspect of its mystery. First among them was Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, writing, and magic. Thoth was not merely a moon god. He was the keeper of time itself, the divine scribe who recorded the deeds of the living and the dead. The Egyptians believed he invented language, mathematics, and science, gifting them to humanity so they could understand the order of the cosmos. And because the moon marked the passage of months with such perfect regularity, Thoth became inseparable from lunar cycles. Imagine a temple at night, somewhere near Thebes. The air is cool and fragrant with lotus and myrrh. Inside, a priest stands before a statue of Thoth, its silver eyes gleaming in the lamplight. The priest recites hymns in a language so ancient it sounds like music. He is asking Thoth for clarity, for insight, for the wisdom to interpret dreams. Because the Egyptians believed that the moon governed the realm of sleep and visions, and Thoth was the guide who could navigate that shadowy world. But there was another lunar god, younger and more dynamic, Khonsu, the traveler. His name literally means wanderer, and he was depicted as a youth with a side lock of hair, wearing the crescent moon as a crown. Khonsu was the moon in motion, crossing the night sky from horizon to horizon, protecting travelers, guiding souls through the afterlife, and even healing the sick in the Grand Temple of Karnak. There stands a smaller sanctuary dedicated to Khonsu. It's a place of quiet power, where the walls are covered in hieroglyphs that tell of his journeys, his battles against demons, his role as the son of Ammonius and Mut. The Egyptians prayed to Khonsu for safe passage, both in life and in death. They believed he could traverse the dangerous paths of the Duat, the underworld, and return unharmed. Just as the moon vanished for 3 nights each month and then reappeared, reborn, the lunar calendar governed much of Egyptian life. Festivals were timed to the moon's phases. Agricultural work followed lunar months. Even the flooding of the Nile, though linked to the sun and stars, was measured against the moon's cycles. The Egyptians understood something profound, that life itself was rhythmic, cyclical, eternal, just like the moon. And then there was the magic. Egyptian priests practiced lunar magic, believing that the moon's phases influenced the potency of spells. Rituals performed under a full moon were thought to be especially powerful, particularly those involving healing or protection. Amulets shaped like the crescent moon were worn to ward off evil. The lunar eye of Horus, the Wedjat, became one of the most sacred symbols in all of Egypt, representing wholeness, health, and divine protection. As the centuries turned, as dynasties rose and fell, as pharaohs built their tombs beneath the desert sands, the moon remained a constant presence. It watched over the living and the dead alike, a silver guardian in the infinite black, and its influence spread beyond Egypt's borders, carried by Greek merchants and Roman conquerors, until it merged with the myths of the Mediterranean, where lunar goddesses would reign supreme. The ancient Greeks loved stories. They wove myths like tapestries, rich with gods and heroes, monsters and miracles. And among their most beloved deities were the goddesses of the moon, Artemis and Selene, each embodying different facets of lunar power. Artemis, twin sister of Apollo, was the huntress, wild, fierce, untamed. She roamed the forests with a bow of silver, her arrows never missing their mark. She was the protector of young women, the guardian of childbirth, the goddess who watched over the liminal spaces, the boundaries between civilization and wilderness, between girlhood and womanhood. And though she was primarily associated with the hunt, Artemis also carried the moon's light with her, especially the crescent, which adorned her brow like a crown. Picture a moonlit clearing deep in the woods of Arcadia. A group of young women gather, dressed in simple white tunics, their hair unbound. They are priestesses of Artemis, and tonight they dance in her honor, moving in circles beneath the moon's glow. Their movements are both joyful and solemn, a ritual that has been performed for generations. They are asking for protection, for strength, for the courage to remain free in a world that often demands their submission. But there was another moon goddess, quieter and more distant, Selene. Where Artemis was active and engaged with the mortal world, Selene was ethereal, almost unreachable. She was the personification of the moon itself, a beautiful woman who rode across the night sky in a chariot drawn by winged horses. Her light was softer than her brother Helios's sun, gentle and soothing, perfect for lovers and dreamers. The Greeks told a famous story about Selene and a mortal shepherd named Endymion. So struck was she by his beauty that she asked Zeus to grant him eternal sleep, so she could visit him every night and gaze upon him forever. It's a strange myth, tinged with melancholy, a love that exists only in dreams, in stillness, in the quiet hours when the world is asleep. It captures something essential about the moon, its association with longing, with the unattainable, with the beauty of things we can see but never quite touch. When Rome rose to dominate the Mediterranean, they absorbed Greek culture and renamed its gods. Selene became Luna, and her worship took on a more formal, structured character. The Romans built temples to Luna, celebrated her festivals, and even minted coins bearing her crescent symbol. Luna was invoked for safe travel at night, for clarity in decision-making, for protection against the unseen dangers that lurked in darkness. But perhaps more than anything, Luna represented the rhythm of time. The Roman calendar was initially lunar, with months beginning at the new moon. Though they later reformed it to a solar calendar, the influence of Luna never faded. The word month itself comes from moon, a linguistic echo of humanity's ancient reliance on lunar cycles, and the Romans, practical as they were, also understood the moon's influence on the natural world. They noticed that tides rose and fell with its phases, that certain animals behaved differently under a full moon, that women's bodies seemed attuned to its rhythm. They didn't have the science to explain it, but they felt it deeply and instinctively. As Rome's empire expanded, so too did the worship of Luna. Her image traveled to Gaul, to Britannia, to North Africa, and in every land she touched, she mingled with local lunar deities, creating a tapestry of beliefs that stretched from the Atlantic to the Indus. And in India, the moon had already claimed a throne of its own, under the name Chandra, the radiant one. In the Vedic traditions of ancient India, the cosmos was not merely physical, it was alive, conscious, interconnected. Every star, every planet, every element of creation was imbued with divine intelligence. And among the celestial bodies, the moon, called Chandra, held a place of profound spiritual significance. Chandra was not a distant, untouchable deity. He was intimate, personal, woven into the very fabric of human existence. He was the lord of the mind, emotions, and inner life. The Vedic sages understood that just as the moon influenced the tides of the oceans, it also influenced the tides within us, our moods, our thoughts, our dreams. Imagine a temple courtyard in ancient Varanasi, the holy city on the Ganges. It is night, and the full moon hangs low and enormous, casting silvery light across the water. Pilgrims have gathered for a ceremony dedicated to Chandra, their voices rising in chants that have been sung for thousands of years. They offer milk and white flowers, symbols of purity and coolness, because Chandra is believed to have a cooling, soothing energy, a balm for the heat and intensity of the sun. In Vedic astrology, Chandra governs the mind and emotions. The placement of the moon in one's birth chart is considered just as important, if not more so, than the sun sign. It reveals the inner landscape of a person, their emotional nature, their subconscious patterns, their capacity for intuition and empathy. To understand someone's moon is to understand their soul. Chandra was also intimately connected to time. The Hindu calendar is lunar, with months divided according to the moon's phases. Festivals like Diwali and Holi are timed to specific lunar days. The waxing moon, Shukla Paksh, is considered auspicious for new beginnings, while the waning moon, Krishna Paksh, is a time for introspection and release. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of Chandra's worship is his role in mythology. He is depicted as a young, radiant god riding a chariot pulled by 10 white horses or an antelope, holding a lotus in his hand. He is married to the 27 nakshatras, the lunar mansions, each representing a night of the moon's journey through the sky. But Chandra's favorite wife was Rohini, and his neglect of the others led to a curse that caused him to wax and wane. losing and regaining his luster in an endless cycle. This myth beautifully explains the moon's phases while also embedding a moral lesson about balance and responsibility at in Ayurveda. The ancient system of medicine, the moon's phases were used to guide healing practices. Full moon nights were believed to amplify the potency of medicinal herbs. Surgeries and treatments were timed according to lunar cycles. Even meditation practices varied with the moon. Certain breathing techniques were more effective under a waxing moon, others under a waning one. The influence of Chandra extended beyond India, traveling along the Silk Road, mingling with Buddhist and Taoist traditions, reaching China, Japan, Korea, lands where the moon would inspire some of the most beautiful poetry, art, and festivals the world has ever known. In China, the moon was never just a celestial body. It was a storyteller, a symbol of reunion, a keeper of ancient wisdom. And its most famous tale is one that every child in East Asia knows by heart. The story of Chang'e, the moon goddess. Long ago, there were 10 suns in the sky, scorching the earth. A great archer named He shot down 9 of them, saving humanity. As a reward, he was given an elixir of immortality. But He didn't want to live forever without his beloved wife, Chang'e, so he kept the elixir safe. One day, while He was away, a greedy apprentice tried to steal it. To protect the elixir, Chang'e drank it herself and immediately floated up to the moon, where she remains to this day, accompanied only by a jade rabbit who pounds herbs for her in an endless mortar and pestle. This story isn't just a myth. It's a meditation on sacrifice, longing, and separation. And it lies at the heart of the Mid-Autumn Festival, one of the most important celebrations in Chinese culture. On the 15th day of the 8th lunar month, when the moon is at its fullest and brightest, families gather to eat mooncakes, light lanterns, and gaze at the sky. It's a time to honor ancestors, to give thanks for the harvest, and, most of all, to think of loved ones far away. Because just as the moon is round and complete, so too should families be reunited. The Moon Festival isn't confined to China. In Korea, it's called Chuseok, a harvest celebration where people return to their hometowns, visit ancestral graves, and share traditional foods. In Japan, Tsukimi, moon viewing, is a more contemplative affair, where people sit quietly, appreciating the beauty of the autumn moon, composing poetry, arranging offerings of rice dumplings and pampas grass. The Chinese also developed a sophisticated lunar calendar, still used today for traditional festivals and agricultural planning. The calendar is lunisolar, meaning it balances both lunar months and solar years, with intercalary months added to keep the seasons aligned. It's a testament to the deep astronomical knowledge of ancient Chinese scholars, who mapped the heavens with remarkable precision. In Taoist philosophy, the moon represents yin energy, feminine, receptive, cool, introspective, in balance with the sun's yang. This duality is fundamental to Chinese cosmology, the belief that harmony arises from the interplay of opposites. The moon is not inferior to the sun. It is its necessary complement, completing the cosmic dance. Chinese poets wrote endlessly about the moon. Li Bai, one of the greatest poets of the Tang dynasty, famously penned lines about drinking wine under the moon, feeling its light as a companion in loneliness. The moon became a symbol of exile, of homesickness, of the bittersweet beauty of transience. And beyond China, the moon's influence rippled throughout East Asia. In Vietnam, the Mid-Autumn Festival is a children's celebration, with colorful lantern parades and line dances. In Thailand, the Loy Krathong Festival sees thousands of floating lanterns released into the sky, offerings to the moon and water spirits. Everywhere you look in East Asia, the moon is present, not as a distant, untouchable deity, but as a member of the family. A presence that connects past and present, earth and heaven, the living and the ancestors. And this sense of connection, of the moon as a bridge between worlds, is something that cultures across the globe have felt. From the Americas to Africa to the islands of the Pacific, the moon does not belong to any one people. It shines equally on every continent, every culture, every corner of the earth. And across the indigenous peoples of the Americas, Africa, and Oceania, the moon has been honored in countless ways, each unique, yet all sharing a common thread of reverence. In North America, Indigenous tribes gave the moon names that reflected the seasons and the rhythms of the land. The Algonquin people spoke of the wolf moon in January, when wolf packs howled in hunger. The harvest moon in September marked the time to gather crops. The snow moon, the flower moon, the strawberry moon. Each name was a story, a reminder of the deep connection between sky and earth. The Lakota people of the Great Plains saw the moon as a protector and a guide. In their creation stories, the moon was often paired with the sun as complementary forces, siblings, or spouses who together governed the passage of time. Lunar eclipses were moments of spiritual significance, times when the balance between light and shadow was tested. In Central and South America, the Maya and Aztec civilizations developed intricate lunar calendars. The Maya, in particular, were master astronomers, calculating lunar cycles with astonishing accuracy. They built observatories into their pyramids, aligning structures to track the moon's movements across the sky. The moon goddess Ixchel was central to their pantheon, a goddess of fertility, weaving, and healing, often depicted with a rabbit, echoing the same lunar rabbit found in Chinese mythology. It's a fascinating example of convergent symbolism. Cultures that never had contact with one another, yet saw the same shapes in the moon's surface. In Africa, the moon held deep spiritual significance across diverse cultures. The Khoi and San people of southern Africa told stories of the moon's death and rebirth, seeing in its phases a metaphor for human mortality and renewal. Among the Zulu, the new moon was greeted with joy and celebration, a sign of new beginnings and fresh opportunities. In West Africa, the Dogon people of Mali possessed astronomical knowledge that baffled Western researchers. They knew details about the star Sirius that shouldn't have been visible to the naked eye, and they tracked lunar cycles with precision for agricultural and ceremonial purposes. The moon was woven into their cosmology as a force of balance and order, and in Oceania, the moon was perhaps most essential of all. For the Polynesian navigators who crossed thousands of miles of open ocean in outrigger canoes, the moon was a compass, a clock, a lifeline. They read its phases to predict tides and currents. They used its position to orient themselves when no land was in sight. The moon was their guide to distant islands, to new worlds, to survival itself. In Hawaiian tradition, the moon, Mahina, was honored with prayers and rituals. Different phases had different energies. Some were good for planting, others for fishing, others for rest. The lunar calendar, known as the Kaulana Mahina, guided daily life with intricate detail, assigning meanings and activities to each night of the lunar month. The Maori of New Zealand called the moon Marama and saw it as a guardian of the night. Maori mythology is rich with lunar stories, tales of the moon's marriage to the sun, of its role in the cycles of life and death, of its watchful presence over voyagers and dreamers. What's striking about all these traditions is their shared recognition that the moon is not passive. It is active, alive, influential. It shapes tides, seasons, emotions, destinies. And whether you're standing on the plains of North America, the coasts of Africa, or the islands of the Pacific, when you look up at the moon, you are connected to every human who has ever lived. You are part of an unbroken chain of wonder that stretches back to the very beginning. But why? Why did the moon have such a profound effect on humanity? Is it merely cultural, symbolic, spiritual, or is there something deeper, something rooted in the very biology of life on Earth? To answer that, we must turn from mythology to science and discover the hidden ways the moon has shaped not just our beliefs, but our existence. Let's take a breath and shift our gaze, just for a moment, from the temples and myths to the mechanics of the cosmos. Because the moon's influence on Earth isn't just spiritual or symbolic. It's real, measurable, and profound. In fact, without the moon, life as we know it might not exist at all. Start with the tides. Twice a day, the oceans rise and fall, pulled by the gravitational embrace between Earth and moon. This isn't a small thing. Tides create intertidal zones, those liminal spaces between sea and shore, where life teems in unique ways. Early evolutionary biologists believe that these zones may have been the crucible where life first transitioned from water to land. The rhythmic washing of waves, the exposure to air and sunlight, the cycles of wet and dry, all driven by the moon. may have been the pressure that pushed primitive organisms to adapt, to develop lungs, to crawl out of the sea and begin the long journey toward becoming us. Even today, countless species are synchronized to the moon's cycles. Sea turtles return to the beaches where they were born to lay eggs during specific lunar phases. Coral reefs spawn in massive, synchronized events timed to the full moon. Certain fish, crabs, and mollusks regulate their reproductive cycles by lunar light. And it's not just marine life. Studies have shown that even land animals, including some birds and insects, exhibit behaviors linked to lunar phases. And then there's us, humans. We like to think we're separate from nature, immune to its rhythms, but the evidence suggests otherwise. For most of human history, our sleep patterns were governed by moonlight. Before electric lights, the brightness of the full moon would have kept people awake longer, fostering social interaction, storytelling, communal bonding. The new moon, by contrast, brought deeper darkness and earlier sleep. Modern research has found that even today, people tend to sleep slightly less during full moons. It's subtle, but measurable. Some scientists theorize that we carry an ancient circulunar rhythm, a biological memory of the moon's cycles, embedded in our genes, and the moon's influence goes even deeper. It stabilizes Earth's axial tilt, preventing wild climate swings that would make life incredibly difficult. Without the moon, Earth would wobble chaotically. Seasons would become unpredictable, and complex life might never have had the stable environment it needed to flourish. Ancient peoples didn't know about gravity or orbital mechanics, but they observed. They noticed that the moon's phases aligned with women's menstrual cycles, an average of 29.5 days, eerily close to the lunar month. They saw that certain plants grew better when planted during specific lunar phases. They watched the tides and learned to predict them. And from these observations, they built calendars, agricultural systems, and entire cosmologies. The moon was their science and their religion, their clock and their compass. And the reverence they felt wasn't superstition, it was wisdom. A recognition that we are part of something larger, something cyclical, something that connects us to the rhythms of the universe itself. When we look back at the temples of Uar, the hymns to Thoth, the dances under Artemis's gaze, the festivals of Chang'e, we're not just looking at quaint old myths. We're looking at humanity's first attempts to understand our place in the cosmos, to honor the forces that shape our lives, to acknowledge that we are, in the deepest sense, children of the moon. And here's the beautiful thing. We live in a different world now. We've walked on the moon. We've mapped its craters, analyzed its rocks, understood its origins. We know it's not a god or a goddess, not Nana or Selene or Chandra. It's a ball of rock and dust, bound to us by gravity, spinning through the silent void. And yet, when the moon rises full and golden over the horizon, we still stop. We still stare. We still feel something ancient stir within us. A quiet awe, a nameless longing, a sense that we are connected to something far older and greater than ourselves, that we still gather for supermoons, filling parks and rooftops, cameras in hand, trying to capture that impossible beauty. We still plan weddings and proposals under its light. We still write songs and poems about it. We still call it romantic, mysterious, magical. We still celebrate lunar New Years in cultures around the world, marking the beginning of a fresh cycle, a new chapter. We still plant gardens according to lunar calendars, still time our lives, consciously or not, to its phases. And on clear nights, when the world is quiet and the stars are bright, we still look up, just like our ancestors did, just like every human who has ever lived. And we see the same moon they saw, the same silver glow, the same silent companion, the same ancient presence that has washed over us since the very beginning. The moon doesn't need our worship anymore. It doesn't need temples or prayers or offerings. But perhaps we still need it, not as a god, but as a reminder that we are part of nature, not separate from it. A reminder that time is cyclical, not linear, that endings are also beginnings. A reminder that even in the darkest night, there is light. Tonight, wherever you are, let yourself drift. Let the moon's light wash over you. Let it carry you back through time, through all the cultures and civilizations that have looked up at it with wonder. Let it remind you that you are part of a story that began long before you were born and will continue long after you're gone. The moon is still there, still watching, still glowing, still waiting for you to look up and remember. And maybe that's the truest form of worship, not in grand rituals or ancient hymns, but in the simple act of noticing, of pausing, of letting yourself be awed by something beautiful and eternal. So look up, feel the pull, and let the moon carry you gently into sleep, into dreams, into the infinite quiet of the night. The moon has always been there, and it always will be.